Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Em Brzezinski and today I am talking to the fabulous Jenny Mak. We're talking about perfectionism and particularly about how that affects writing. And we are exploring the way in which perfectionism can make you get stuck on the PhD journey and think about things that you can do about that. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Emma.
Thank you so much for being here all the way from Singapore. It's very exciting. I was just saying to you, it's very hot here. And I was like, that's not a cool thing to say. That's not the right thing to say to someone from Singapore because you're just like, you're so lightweight. But you were very gracious about it. So here we are. And we're going to be talking about writing in particular in a minute because that is your zone of genius. But first of all, I'm going to do like I do with everybody and just ask you to tell us a little bit about your PhD story and kind of going through that experience and how you ended up where you are now.
Sure. Thank you, Emma, for having me here. I did a PhD in English literature, and for me, I've always loved books. I've always been into, writing and reading and analyzing literature. So that's kind of where I went. And and at the same time, for myself, I have quite an international background. I was born in Hong Kong, in Singapore, and I've also been in UK for a very long time. So this idea of like a global identity was always interesting to me. So when I got into academia, when I decided to do my PhD, looking at, the experiences of globalization in literature and how it's represented in there came very naturally. And I found myself also interested particularly in, how the body is a site of that kind of experience. So, by that time, that was how I got into studying or specializing in that area in my PhD. And I did that in England, like at Warwick, and it was an amazing time that I had over there. Yeah.
And so with the writing then, we're going to sort of go into that in a little bit more detail. But so you had this interest in English literature. Then
Yes.
what? Then where did that take you next after the PhD?
Yeah. So like as we know, like for literature, it's more research focused. So you're analyzing, you're deconstructing literature. But I've always also had an interest in writing, who I am and my own experience in the world as well. So alongside the PhD, or rather after that, I got back into my own pursuing my own creative writing and writing, short fiction, plays, screenplays, poetry, all kinds of genre. And until today, I have chosen to focus more to go more into the creative writing aspect. But I think both it informs each other. So like the study of literature also informs writing and vice versa. When you write, then you can understand maybe how authors approach their works.
Yes. Well, I love it. I love that about your story is that it fuels your creative work now. And that I think is really, really gorgeous. And this sense of the PhD journey as something that is feeding you. Because I think often people experience it as something that's draining the life out of them. So actually, to know
I totally get that. I totally sympathize.
But to know that it can be something that feeds you and you can kind of be building up a storehouse of materials and ideas and energy, that is possible on a PhD journey. It really is. Awesome.
And actually, I also wanted to add on to that, which is that if anything, the PhD really taught me very valuable skills for writing. So, which I think, I mean, it's such a, because writing a PhD, doing a PhD, it's hard. It's a challenging process. So you learn very valuable skills, and discipline through that, which I can then bring, I still bring to my own writing practice today. So
yes,
yeah.
I mean, I think it really is a writing boot camp, isn't it? I know certainly from my experience,
definitely.
Yeah, from my experience, it was definitely learning how to write. Of course, I thought I knew how to write. I was like, oh no, this is a whole different way of reflecting on how I'm communicating. And I think that can be a really empowering experience. Often is not, but we're going to get into that today in terms of how to kind of approach that for yourself. Because we particularly thought we'd focus on talking about perfectionism and the writing process, because that is often where perfectionism shows up in terms of, right, well, either I'm not going to start writing because it's not going to be perfect, therefore I'm going to start, or you're just second guessing yourself, and as soon as you put anything down on the page, you delete it again. So tell us a little bit about your experience of perfectionism and writing, or your perspective on perfectionism and writing.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it is in the writing of the PhD, and, in literature, we have to write a lot. And I think that's the difference between, maybe a humanities degree versus, like, for example, a science degree, where right in the first year, we have to start writing. And I had a supervisor who told me, it's, you read and you explore, but you also write alongside that, because that's how you think. So you have to already start doing that. But the writing process my PhD, for me, I think the first 2 years was me sort of taking my time to explore my topic, but also managing other things like teaching and marking and all that sort of thing. So in some sense, like, I was personally, I myself was trying to learn how to even manage the PhD project, which is a huge project, right? Over 3, 4, 5 years. And so then, but by my second year and third year, I was kind of panicking, because I looked at my actual content, like what I produce, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to write, I need to produce more chapters. And that's when I think near that point of time, I started really putting in the word count, or I was like, no, I need to clarify my ideas, and in order for me to sort of formulate my thesis, my argument, and sort of produce the word count. And that's where the perfectionism, tendency, like that's what I discovered about myself, because I noticed that I was really trying to, craft the perfect sentence, try to express ideas as clearly and perfectly as I could. And I noticed that I would be editing myself. And and that was a crucial chapter that I was working on, because I was like trying to formulate my central thesis. And I was thinking that, okay, if I can just word it perfectly, then I would understand my thesis is really about. And then all the other chapters would naturally sort of cohere around that, and my thesis would be done. And so I 1 year when I was, I kept reworking one chapter, and I ended up writing, just because, and actually the interesting thing is that I didn't realize I was in it until a friend told me after that, told me that, you've been reworking that same chapter 3 times now over the year. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. So sometimes, you need someone to sort of pull you out of it.
Yes.
And then that's when that was a hard lesson to learn, that, wow, I can't sort of stay stuck in this sort of perfectionism loop that keeps me stuck on one chapter. I have to move on to the other parts of the thesis and trust and work through, my worries, my doubts about what I'm writing, in order to then get to or in order at least to get to what the thesis is about, and then to produce the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I think when you said there about being stuck in this loop, that is the key thing, isn't it? And that's what perfectionism can really do, is get you stuck.
Yeah.
You think it's taking you forward because you're like, right, I'm going to craft this. And like you said, I want to craft the perfect sentence. I'm going to craft the perfect chapter. And when this is done, everything is going to fall into place. And it's like, well, maybe not.
Exactly. You're thinking that you're clarifying things for yourself, but actually you're just reworking the same thing. You're going back and sort of editing yourself when actually what you need to do is to move forward. And even though and you know that actually you're going to change things anyway, but you actually need to move forward in order to produce the draft to have something to change.
And it can really, it's a big step to do that, to go, okay, I'm going to just leave this for the moment. I'm going to come back to it, and it's going to be okay because I'm going to rework this. Because the thing is, what often happens anyway, as we know, is that you really work on a particular key linchpin chapter. You then go on to work on other chapters, and you have to rework that linchpin chapter anyway, because the other chapters, there's a development in thinking, and then you need to come back and revisit it. So it's not going to sit there. Otherwise, it won't fit with the rest of the material. So it's kind of, but your brain is telling you, get this done before you move on. And actually, there's a fear, isn't there, in terms of exploring that other material often.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And fear of criticism as well. Like fear, because, you're going to have to show this to someone like your supervisor or your peer. And it was also that fear of like, the subconscious fear of like, oh, I would write something wrong, and then that would, provoke, or that would give space for people to criticize. And if they're going to criticize anyway, is there something now that I can, I'm writing to fix it? And of course that's, you can't, because you kind of have to hear that. You can't cover all the blind spots anyway. Yeah.
Yes. You're going to have to put it out there for feedback, and in order to, hopefully that feedback will come with the desire to improve the work. And so it's that sense of an editing process. You would never assume, I know I've said this before in the podcast, but you'd never assume with a publisher that you just kind of go away for a while, deliver it and go, there you go, ready for publication. You just wouldn't. It's going to go through lots of iterations, that there's going to be editors involved and copy editors, and all of that's going to happen. And so with the PhD, it's kind of acknowledging it is an iterative process, and writing is going to develop as you go. And
I think that's the thing, right? Because we know that, like, as you say, we know that on a very rational level, but when we're actually writing, it's that conditioned idea that it, like, you still resist that idea, or you still can't accept it. Actually, you're like, no, actually, subconsciously, you're trying to produce a perfect draft that no one will criticize and no one will poke holes in. And
I think it also, because it links back to quite a sort of this sort of an undergraduate, it's about fear and protecting yourself, absolutely, but also links back to your kind of your previous learning as an undergraduate. Because as an undergraduate, what you do is you drive on through, you get things together, you give in your essay, hooray, it's done, it's finished. Then we move on to the next thing. And that isn't how the PhD is either. That's the sense of it's a kind of developmental process, and you have to kind of come back and look at that material again. However painful that may be, to go, coming back to this chapter again.
Yes. Oh, that's a really key point. Yeah, because the chapters, as you said, the chapters link to each other. So you are under even more pressure to be like, I need to get this chapter right so that the next chapter would make sense. Because if I get anything wrong in this chapter, then the next chapter won't make sense. So there is more of that pressure versus like in that undergraduate degree where, like you say, it's just a one-off assignment. You just, you write it and you're done. You don't have to think about it, really.
And I think that sense of them linking together, it's really important that there is a kind of an openness still, that it isn't, tied up with a bow, that one chapter, because the one chapter, it has to speak to the other chapters. And so there will be needing to adapt, needing to link, needing to perhaps reorder some material, or some material that needs to come out of this chapter and go into another chapter. So it's kind of writing with an open hand, if you like. I think that. So
yeah, and knowing then when to stop, knowing then when to move on.
yes. And have you got any thoughts or suggestions on how to kind of come to that place where you can move on to the next thing, that it's not finished, you've not finished it yet, but you're moving on?
Yeah. So I think for me, it really has been a learning process for that. And I think in that sense, like, I think when students they write, they kind of have to train themselves to listen to that intuition of when internally you kind of feel that you can kind of sense that, I'm reaching a point where I'm just sort of going around in circles. Like I'm not producing any new ideas. And, I kind of have, maybe, I don't know, like 8,000 words down, even 10,000 words down. And this has to be sort of sent off to someone to be read. So I think so there's the internal, which is that kind of sensing. And then there's the external, which is, you have a deadline, right? You set deadlines to your supervisors, where they kind of, you and your supervisor agree that, okay, this is the date that we're going to have to produce, a draft or, part of a chapter. And so, whatever the state of that piece of writing, whatever the state of that is at that moment, you just send it off. And you might think it's like the worst thing you ever written, but usually it's not as bad as you think, firstly. And secondly, if anything, at that point, even if it's not at the state that you would like it to be, if anything, it would still benefit from feedback. I find that because by that time, your supervisor can actually give you feedback that might have saved you, the extra few steps that you might have taken.
Yes.
If you thought you would continue, right? Like, and you realize, actually, you didn't actually need to do those other steps. If anything, you need to do another set of steps that maybe your supervisor then can more sort of adequately advise you on.
Yes. Because it's your first PhD, probably, but it won't be theirs, hopefully. So there's this sense of, they hopefully will help you on quicker, hopefully. And we know there's often difficulties, but hopefully we'll go on quicker. And I think what you said there, I think I'm going to start a campaign to change the word from deadline to sort of milestone or something like that, because I think this sense of what you said there is brilliant in terms of it's a check-in point, because when we say deadline, we kind of think everything needs to be finished and polished and done. That's the deadline, that's when it ends. And actually, often, as you say, what might be happening is just checking in where you're at with some thinking and the material, and whether checking in with that. So
I agree. And oftentimes I think if that sort of checking in point was really met, and sort of, if people can in some sense get over that hurdle or that worry that, that it's not perfect enough, and then just send it out and let that piece of writing be seen, then like really the whole process would tend to be faster, just because you have your another brain to think for you as well, like whether or not this piece of writing, this argument is working.
Exactly. Subcontract your editing.
It is.
That's so useful. So I feel like we've already got some top tips out of you, but I am going to ask, because I'm cheeky, if you do have another kind of top tip or takeaway, because now you are a writer, that is what you do all day every day. So any tips on writing
in order to sort of get through this perfectionism?
Absolutely.
I think, I'd really say the key principle really is to get comfortable with failure, with sort of writing that, you don't feel like it should be shown, but actually that it's actually okay to be shown. So another practice or something I've tried before is we had with some of my friends who were doing PhD as well. We had a writing group, and it was suggested to me by my supervisor. So what we did was we'd meet maybe, I don't know, maybe every week or every fortnight, anyone in that group who wants to sort of share a piece of writing, they can share it in that group, and there's no extra homework. And what that means is that that piece of writing will be shared during that meeting, and we'll sit down and everyone would take maybe the first 20 minutes to read it. And then we would sort of, after 20 minutes, we would give feedback on to the person who wrote the piece. So, and it could be anything. It could be a conference abstract. It could be, like a draft of a journal article. It could be a draft of a chapter. It could be a draft of a conference paper, that sort of thing. And it could be how long or short. So I think, if you're having these kind of regular meetups with your friends, with your peers who can actually give you that kind of feedback, then you're more used to firstly showing your writing to others and not judging yourself too harshly about it. And secondly, then you can actually hear feedback you get used to hearing feedback from people without taking it personally, because I think that's the other fear, right? It's about worrying about not being able to handle or being very affected by negative or so-called negative feedback. And because that sort of ties into our own insecurities or imposter syndrome, that sort of thing. So I think just maybe setting up that practice and again leaning into your community of peers, so that you get used to showing your feedback, showing your work, and also hearing feedback. That would sort of ease up the fear of just sort of not sharing a work that you think is just not good enough, when actually it is good enough. And it just, if anything, that is the moment that you need to hear what other people say, and
Brilliant.
Use that.
Brilliant. And I think that ticks so many boxes as well. So not only are you going to be getting feedback, and as you say, doing that whole thing of like, this is just, it's my work, it's not about me, it's about my work, but also it's it's building community, so you get that, you meeting with people and discussing with people. And also I think you can learn so much from reading other people's work and hearing about other people's processes. I think that's genius. I think if people are worried about, well, how can I meet these people, that there are brilliant ways out there. I do speed dating sessions and so that people can meet each other. There are places. Your doctoral school is likely to sort of have a data bank of people who are doing their PhD that you can kind of connect with. People within your department will be even better because they'll have that sort of disciplinary knowledge. Jenny, thank you so much for that. That's really fantastic insights there.
No worries.
Thank you. And if people want to find out more about your practice, they will have all the details on the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening.
No worries. Thank you, Emma, for having me. I mean, again, it's been really fun talking about the process of writing and perfectionism and the PhD. And I really hope that anyone who listens to this gets something out of it and use it for their own PhD journey.
Thank you. I echo that. And thank you all for listening.